Jake is on the line from Montpellier. Straight to you, Mots. You've got a question for the coach.
Yeah, Coach, I wanted to ask you, how long should the rugby-loving public give a coach to start seeing his vision and plan coming into fruition? How much leniency does a coach need to say, guys, just wait and see what is going to happen? And I also wanted to find out from you, your top 3 criteria for a national team coach. What should it be?
Okay, look, the first question is, I don't think there's a time frame, and I don't think there's a sort of, cut and dried example of you need X amount of time. I think every national coach goes in with a different, firstly, he gets a different team. I mean, as it is in Alistair's case, a lot of the players have now retired and he started from ground zero, which again, I think has been a problem because, as I said, I think that one of the criteria of the national coach, and that's probably the second question, is that he should have an understanding about how he wants to play. He should have an understanding about what's needed for the Springboks and a way to win, because at the end of the day, it's about winning. And thirdly, most importantly, I think that he has to be a custodian of the game and hand it over to the next generation in a better state than he finds it.
Yeah.
And I would think that that's probably one area where we because we're so, and I'm talking about as coaches, we're so under pressure to perform and so under pressure to win games and so under pressure to keep our jobs that, in effect, whatever happens after us is irrelevant. And I think with that comes a massive loophole for South African rugby, because what it means is that every time a coach leaves, then the next coach starts from zero again. So I suppose those 3 things would be important: understanding about what he wants to do as a coach, how he wants to play. I think you've got to find a way to win. I think you've got to understand in South Africa that the way you win in South Africa is not necessarily the way you win in New Zealand, and it's not necessarily the way you win in England. So you need to be appreciative of the fact that you need to find a way. And I said, last of all, I really believe that his duty is to make sure that the next coach and the next generation of players are in a better state than when he took it over. And I really believe that's one area where we probably, for many, many, many years, have erred on handing it over to the next coach in a better place than you found it.
Yeah, quite important there, Jake. Given the current situation that Alistair's in, and you've been in the situation, I think, in 2006 when you had a quick flight home during your tour. But how did you go about changing that? I mean, how do you get the public, which, as you said, they're quite they've quite a go at their head coach. But how do you get that perception for the team to start winning, the public opinion to sway in your favour, and from there, take the necessary steps forward to get things in the right direction?
Yeah, Robbie, look, I think you need a bit of luck. I think, to be fair, you need things to go for you. But I also think that you have to test yourself in those areas, and I suppose that's why, the older you are and the more experience you have, and I'm not the one that's saying that that's what I had. I mean, I'm obviously older and wiser now, but I think the older, wiser coaches who've been there probably handle that a lot better, and they understand it a lot better. And I think that, as I said, it's a tough one, because in 2006, in a lot of ways we used that as a massive positive for the way we prepared for the World Cup, because, Ashton will tell you there as he sits there in the studio that, that we knew that when it got to the World Cup that no team would have ever experienced anything as tough as we experienced in 2006, and we used that as a massive motivator and boost for us when we felt the pressure, because we realized that no team that ever came against us would have experienced what we went through in 2006. So, I mean, it was a little bit of everything, I suppose, a bit of luck, a bit of understanding that counted in our favor. And as I said, probably, at the time I had Ian McIntosh with me, and he gave me, a couple of pearls of wisdom about what was needed from my point of view in order to get the team back on track.
Jake, just on the points that you've raised, you talk about the way to play, and You've obviously worked with Alistair as well, and if we look at the past weekend when we played against New Zealand, the lineouts was one of the attacking options that the Boks, in the first half, especially when the captain Strauss was still on, was very effective in throwing the ball in the back and playing into the vacuum, changing the up a bit. Malcolm Marx coming on, not having the best day in the lineout, but the lineouts was an area that we wanted to launch this attack from. So if you look at the way the Boks has been performing, the way they were able to play from set faces, in particular the line-out, do you think that it identifies a way of play for Alistair that potentially can get him to become the force in world rugby that we hope the Boks could be?
Ash, it's interesting because I watched that game and I think everyone understands that when our line-out and scrum works, South Africa, then we really play well. But I think where again, I suppose one has to be understanding of the fact that New Zealand know they don't beat you line-outs. They may kick the ball down the middle of the field and they'd rather defend your counter-attack. And if you then have a scrum off on wing, and you have a left wing who's got 100 tests on the right wing, and you've got a fly-off playing at fullback, well then, theoretically, you haven't done yourself any favours in terms of being able to counter-attack against New Zealand. So, I mean, you're right. I think that every team, every country realises when they give us set piece and when they get us to be able to play from set piece, we're really good. And we get confidence out of that because it's all organised. I think we probably feel a little bit more vulnerable when teams give us the ball and we don't really want it because we're not quite sure if we should run it or kick it. But again, that goes with who you then play in your back three, Ashwin. And there's no doubt, as I said, it's not being facetious. If you have Brian who's got 100 tests on the right wing and you've got Hougaard playing on the left wing, and then Huerson, who was a 10 playing at fullback, it does come with a risk because if they give you the ball when you don't want it to three players who generally haven't played much rugby in those positions, well then you're not really going to get a return on your investment when you've got the ball in your hands.
Jake, would you then put that also down to the defensive errors, one could say, or the defensive structures that, if we look at the game against New Zealand again, talk about the last game, the 6 tries that was scored against us, especially the first 2, where literally from a set piece, one set up and then throw the ball wide and they end up scoring. Would you contribute that to the fact that what you've now mentioned about the back 3? Because they are fundamental in defensive organisation as well as the scrum half. We've got Faf de Klerk in there. So do you think that is a contributing factor to our defence?
Yes, you played wing, my boy, you know more than most people. I mean, it's not as easy going from left wing to right wing. Because one side you defend with the scrum half in, and the next side you defend without the scrum half. And if you consider it's not just the 2 tries they scored. They scored 4 tries on Brian Abana's side as well. Where he jammed in and they beat him for pace in the left-hand corner. So, I mean, it's not because Brian Abana doesn't understand. It's because he's a new part of the field. Usually on the other side of the wing, he's probably a bit more comfortable. He knows when to close. He knows when to wait back. He knows when to come in. And then if you consider, and again, it's not a critic, as I said, it's not trying to be clever in hindsight, but Jean de Jong's played all his test rugby at 13 and then he played his first test against the All Blacks at 12. I mean, it is a very difficult ask considering that he's never played with Jesse Creel as a 13 and never played a match with Elton Yankee. So, when you look at it all that, Ashwin, I mean, the back 3 years is part of the problem, but I also feel that it's very difficult to get sort of cohesion and understanding and who defends where when you've got a really, really new background playing together and they're not really understanding of where they've got to go and where they've got to fold and where they've got to stay.
Jake, then your last point, when you talk about being a custodian and making sure that you hand over to the next coach in a better state. Here we've got Alistair Coetzee, the most qualified for the job, got the job, and he inherited or he selected a squad from where the Lions are the core, the best performing South African Super Rugby team. None of the Lions players was part of the Springboks next year. Do you think that makes Alistair's position a little bit more difficult based on the third point that you've mentioned of what is required of a top coach?
Yeah, as it is. I mean, it is. It's normal. I think, I think there's always pressure. I mean, obviously when one side's dominating, the supporters will obviously be quite vocal and they'll want their own guys to be playing. But part of the challenge is, and again, I think this is very important for the supporters and for the people listening to the show. If you get born in an era where the best players in the world are playing in your position, then you miss the boat. You can't then say because you play in a good provincial side, you should be playing for the Springboks. But I remember the young boy when Lars Whitmer played, and Eric Herbert thought that he was, deserved the chance. It was never going to happen. Michael du Plessis and Donnie Gerber played centres, and someone else played well. They didn't get dropped because those were the two best players we had in those positions. And it's no different in any other country. If you were an open side flanker in New Zealand when McCall played, you didn't play. If you were a hooker and Sean Fitzpatrick played, you didn't play. So, I really believe that one of the things that's happened, and I know you mentioned about the Lions doing well, but you can't have one good Currie Cup, Ashwin, and expect to be a Springbok. And you can't play in a watered-down Currie Cup as it is now and think that after you've played, relatively well, that you deserve a chance to be a Springbok. I was lucky enough to have obviously read a lot about Doc Craven, and I think that one of the things that South Africa got to go back to, it should be very difficult to be a Springbok. A Springbok, when you pick him, he's got to be good enough to stay there for a while. He cannot get one or two test matches and then you dump him, because otherwise you've made a mistake in your selections. And if it means that you're behind a guy who's the best in the world and you then miss your chance, well, then that's just the way life works. And so, again, getting back to the provincialism, it's not a thing on the Lions, it's not a thing on any other province. It's just about, if you happen to be in a good provincial side, but the guy incumbent is better than you, and they've invested 30, 40 tests in that player, then I think it's only fair that that guy continues to play and get the best coaching and the best environment to be the best in the world.
Well, Jake, I'm going to jump straight in there because, I wish we had the entire hour. We don't, which does mean that I'm just going to have to pressurize you joining us on the show again as we continue the conversation, because it's not a once-off. We are trying to find solutions, so we hope that in the next couple of weeks you'll join us on TMO again.
Yeah, no, that'd be kind. Thank you so much, Paul. I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. We really appreciate your input. And as I mentioned, we hope to hear even more. Thanks very much for the tweets as well. And as I mentioned, not the last time we speak to him, and we will be looking for even more voices to weigh in on the conversation.